And this is about Nomiki Konst. So she went back on Fox. Sorry. She went back on Fox News on the Faulkner Report. She's been on there before. I've talked about her on there before. I don't know what happens when she goes onto this show, but they seem to trip her up for whatever reason. I don't know. She's not as much on the offense. Like she should be more on the offensive side, right? But it seems like when she goes onto that show, for whatever reason, she tends to back down. And I don't know why that is, but this was not a good look. I got a lot to say. Let me go ahead and add this to the stream here. So also shout out to Case Study QB for this as well. So Nomiki Konst asked why Americans are leaning back away from the Democratic Party in the latest polls. So that's what they're talking about here. Again, it's about Joe Biden's sinking poll numbers, which is not a surprise to a lot of us. And so here we go.
Nomiki, I'm going to come to you first and just get your initial thoughts on why you think Democrats in those particularly important categories for voters are leaning back away from your party.
Listen, I mean, this is a very tough economy, but, you know, when you look into those numbers in the polls and you dig in a little bit more, you see that a quarter of Americans are blaming the pandemic. Another quarter of Americans are blaming corporate price gouging, like the oil companies who are jacking up gas prices right now for their benefit, and Congress is now investigating. It is historic that, as we all know, in the midterms, whatever president it is, their party is not doing as well. But if you even see those numbers, it's a statistical tie. So, you know, it's wonky and people don't want to, you know, polls are polls and they can influence how people feel about things. And obviously, you know, if you really do want to look at the polls, Donald Trump right now is doing his best ever.
Oh boy,
and it's exactly where Joe Biden is right now at his lowest ever.
Okay, but we don't have Donald Trump. We have one president at a time, and his name is Joe Biden. And on it.
Yes, thank you so much for saying that. Listen, I'm so sick and tired of people bringing up Donald Trump. And I am glad that the host said that, because I'm tired of it. I'm tired of it. I'm hearing it from you know, establishment Democrats, and then I'm hearing it from left independent media too. Stop talking about Trump. Donald Trump is not president anymore. I don't know why people are tending to make this comparison. They're continuing to talk about him. This man is not president anymore. Every time you bring him up in these discussions, when talking about what Joe Biden is supposed to be doing right now for this country, all you're doing is giving Trump more relevance. People would forget about him and he would fade away if you don't continue to bring up what Trump did. How would you guys feel if I came on here every night and I was like, but Trump, but Trump, but Trump, but Trump? You probably wouldn't be too happy with me. The current president of the United States right now is Joe Biden. It's not Donald Trump. And Joe Biden has to answer for his behavior, has to answer for the things that he is doing right now while he's in office. And you have people like Nomiki Konst, like Anna Kasparian, that whole TYT group, Majority Report group, David Dole, Kyle Kulinski, Crystal Ball, all of these people that made their money off of Bernie Sanders campaigns, they still refuse to let go of Orange Man bad. The number of times they are ignoring the fact that this is 100% Joe Biden. Last time I checked, you want to go back to the stimulus checks? Let's go back to that. That was under Joe Biden. Trump didn't promise us $2,000 and give us half the amount or less than the amount. Joe Biden did that. Call them out. And when they won't do it, what that tells me is that at the end of the day, they're Democrats. They're still defending the Democratic Party because they still want you at the end of the day to vote for the Democratic Party. Whether it's a progressive going through, whether it's a Democratic socialist going through, They want those people to go in through the Democratic Party, and they still keep you voting for the fucking party that is screwing you over. Still have you voting for the same people who are doing nothing. And the number of excuses I've seen them make for Joe Biden is ridiculous. I got heated, but it needed to be said. And I'm glad she said that. Listen to the rest of it. It does not get any better from here. I will tell you that.
At least half of what you mentioned, he's underwater, the pandemic. Remember, he said he was going to come in and fix it. What was he going to do? Matt, he was going to shut down the virus. That has not happened. But Nomiki, I appreciate your love of history. Matt?
No. If you look at the polls or the crosstabs there, the number one issue is the economy and inflation. And 63% of respondents disapprove of how Biden has handled that. That's not just a red flag, that's a flashing red warning signal. But also, this poll is historic for other reasons. As you saw, the generic ballot there, Republicans lead by 2 points. That's the first time NBC has had a lead for Republicans on that question since September of 2014. Ooh. And later that year, Republicans elected the largest House majority since the 1920s. That's historic. And if you look, I think Afghanistan proved to be Biden's Katrina moment, where it undermined his argument of competence and the adult in the room, and it exposed him, and it hasn't gotten better for him since.
All right, let's talk money. Biden's approval on the economy also at an all-time low with just 33%.
Guys, I'm sorry. This whole talking point that he just gave, well, his decisions with Afghanistan, it exposed him. Okay, yes, a lot of people were upset about his decisions with Afghanistan. It is what it is. I didn't agree with what he did with Afghanistan. I think he did it the wrong way. Obviously, he put sanctions on Afghanistan, and those kids are suffering and people are starving in Afghanistan because of the decisions that Joe Biden made. But let's be real here. Let's call a spade a spade. Because Joe Biden revealed himself a long time ago. Joe Biden co-wrote the crime bill. Joe Biden said he didn't want his kids to grow up in a racial jungle. Joe Biden wouldn't let Anita Hill's witnesses testify. Hello. Let's go back to that when we talk about believe women. Joe Biden accused of sexual assault by Tara Reade, and people tended to be shocked by that. And so many people came out and smeared Tara Reade because of that. And I'm like, do you not remember what happened against Anita Hill? When Anita Hill had evidence against Clarence Thomas, and it was Joe Biden was the one who said, no, your witnesses cannot testify. So let's stop pretending like Joe Biden just revealed who he was last year. He revealed his whole ass many decades ago. He has been in office for over 40 years. We always knew who Joe Biden was. Let's be real. Let's stop pretending that he was this saint. Go back into the video.
Of people approving of its handling by Biden. 38% blame the president for rising inflation, which hit 7.9% in February. I'll come in reverse order. Matt.
No, again, that's a huge issue. And as you mentioned before, his numbers among Latinos and African Americans is also troublesome. Look, Republicans have been making really quiet gains, steady gains, though, over the last couple of years. Democrats have taken them for granted. They assume that all they care about is either immigration or free stuff, when all they really care about is all what the rest of us care about, which is the economy, making sure their streets are safer and their houses are safer and their kids get a quality education. It's not rocket scientists, and it's certainly not pandering.
Nomiki.
Well, I got to hand it to you, Matt. Your jujitsu, your communications jujitsu is amazing. The fact that you mentioned 2014 is the last time Republicans did better. Again, that was a midterm year. This is historic. That is how it works. Everybody knows that, but you do a great job at that. Also, I mean, let's see. I would like to know how much we're losing support among minorities. It's actually quite small, and you are gaining a very, very, very tiny, almost not even.
Pause. I think Nomiki is missing the point here. How much support are we losing amongst minorities? It's actually very, very small. You can't afford to lose any support from minorities. Nomiki, you've been in politics. Your mom was in politics. You know how this works for the Democratic Party. You can't afford to lose black voters. Dems don't win without black votes. The fact that she's trying to downplay this and make it seem like it's not that big of a deal, bullshit. It's a big deal. I just told you, independents helped Joe Biden win Arizona. Bet you he won't win it next time around. If you think that black voters in Georgia are going to come out for Joe Biden the way they did last time, let's remember there's no Trump this time. And I've talked to a lot of black people in the Atlanta area, and they are not happy with Joe Biden because he made promises to them as well. What happened to the free HBCUs? What happened to that? I thought he was going to take away student loan debt for kids that went to HBCUs. What? So let's stop pretending that it's just a little teeny amount. He shouldn't be losing support from them at all. Don't you understand that? What does that say to you? And keep in mind, those are just the black people they polled. That doesn't include a lot of the younger black people. And that little teeny amount will be a lot higher. Trust. Keep go ahead defending Joe Biden.
Relevant number of minority support. Let's go back to your numbers, which is important because the economy is in this situation because the corporations, the multinational corporations, which fund the lobbyists,
you do realize that the price of gas was up by like $1.92 before we got into a situation where we told Russia we wouldn't buy any more oil and the numbers started to really burst.
I'm not blaming Putin.
Okay, but what about the cost of bread? That doesn't have anything to do with the oil companies or the big corporations.
It has to do with CEOs price gouging. They're price gouging everywhere to an effect that Congress is now going to investigate it. If the Republican Party is blind to this because they take donations,
my favorite part of your argument, Nomiki, was arguing how many blacks, Latinos, independents, and women don't like you. It's like that was the argument. It's great to have you both. It's always.
Ouch. How do you let the Republican network put you on blast like that? How do you let the host on the Republican network out left you? That's what just happened there. I don't know if Nomiki is doing her research before she goes into these shows or not, but the host is actually correct. She had to point out, you realize that the gas prices were already starting to increase before the Ukraine-Russia invasion, before the sanctions were put on. Then Nomiki comes back and goes, well, yeah. I mean, I'm not blaming Putin. It's, the CEOs are price gouging. The CEOs are, again, at the end of the day, no one on this panel got down to the root problem. Why are the CEOs allowed to price gouge? Why are they allowed to increase the gas prices? Why do we have an issue right now with the supply chain? All of this at the end of the day goes back to capitalism. There's no maximum amount. If they want to keep increasing the price for food, they can. I don't see anybody stopping them. If they want to continue to increase the price for gas, they can. Again, who is stopping them? And at the end of the day, even though prices have increased and are continuing to increase, you have a president of the United States that still does not want to cancel student loan debt for people. You have a president of the United States that doesn't want to give everybody universal health care. Those are two things that he can do by executive order. So This is really not a time for you to point fingers at Trump or anybody else. You should be pointing fingers directly at Joe Biden. Let me come out of this video. This is the point that I really, really, really want to drive home. The issues that Joe Biden can solve right now. Nomiki is blaming the CEOs. Why don't you blame Joe Biden for not canceling student loan debt, for not giving everybody health care? Hell, you had 8 Democrats vote against a $15 minimum wage? Honey, this is all in your party. Your party. This is not, the Republicans are not in power right now. These are the Democrats who are doing these things. You got Democrats sitting in the Senate. They don't even want you guys to have a $15 minimum wage, even though if you look at inflation, it should actually be higher than that. Those were Democrats. And Nomiki knows that, and she's not going to say that because at the end of the day, she's a part of the Democratic Party. Both of those parties serve corporations, they protect corporations, and they protect capital. They are not in place to protect or help us. They just need us to vote for them. That's it. And this goes back to something that Roger Meadows has said time and time again. This is why we really don't need political parties. If we didn't have political parties, can you imagine how easy it would be to just bring people together in this country over the class issue? To get everybody to focus on the fact that you have all these corporations, that you have all of these banks, which people don't want to mention, Goldman Sachs, Wells Fargo, controlling every damn thing that happens in this country. More people would pay attention to that if they weren't so fixated on having this ideology that they have to belong to a certain party. It's like when I lived in North Carolina. When I first moved there, people told me, which team are you? Which team am I? What do you mean? You're either a Tar Heels fan or you're a Duke fan. I didn't like either one. I wasn't a fan of either school. They said, no, you live in North Carolina. You have to pick one. That's what it reminds me of. Now, after everything that I've showed you tonight, the stories about AOC and Ro Khanna, the story with Nomiki, when we talk about the Democratic Party, and they're still thinking that progressives can actually come in and change this party and make a change when history has shown us otherwise. It's really not a good way to think about this. And so I want to talk about this and use a sports analogy. Let's go to football. You know, it is very rare that someone can leave a well-established team and go to a team that, let's say, is not as good and turn that whole team around. Some coaches have been able to do that. Players, the most recent person that I know that has done that is Tom Brady. Tom Brady left the Patriots, went to Tampa Bay. The coach of Tampa Bay trusted Tom Brady. I know this, I saw the interview. He actually trusted him, and he believed that Tom Brady could bring that team to a Super Bowl. The first year he was with Tampa Bay, what did Tom Brady do? He brought that team to a Super Bowl. Not only did he bring them there, but they won. But there was the coach who believed in Tom Brady. He trusted him. When you look at the Democratic Party, when you look at Congress, you look at the House of Representatives. The person running the show is Nancy Pelosi. Let's pretend she's the coach. You had a handful of progressives come in believing that they could change the House, but they couldn't, because the person in charge, Nancy Pelosi, she didn't believe in them. Not only did she not believe in them, she didn't believe in their policies. She didn't believe in their rhetoric. She didn't believe that that was the way to go. And Nancy Pelosi, she is aligned with her donors, and they are very corporate. And this goes back to something that CJ mentioned a couple weeks ago. Even though members of the squad may not have taken or accepted, or I would argue some of this for some of them, corporate money, but Nancy Pelosi sure as hell does. And she answers to her donors. And as part of her job, she is to protect the Democratic Party and to make sure that people like the progressives who went in don't change the party. She wants things to stay the same. At the end of the day, Nancy Pelosi doesn't want to win. You get what I'm saying? The Tampa Bay coach wanted to win. Tom Brady wanted to win. Nancy Pelosi don't want to win. She just wants to fundraise. That's the difference. So the idea that you are going to bring in people like AOC, you got AOC and Rokana, they're not even on the same page, and Rokana's supposed to be progressive just like her. They're not even on the same page. What needs to happen is those progressives who went into the Democratic Party, they need to leave the Democratic Party and they need to start their own damn party. A third party. Hell, you can call it whatever you want. But it is very clear that the coach in the House is not going to let them come in and run the show. I hope you guys understood that sports analogy. And if you don't know anything about football, maybe you know something, a little bit of it now. I don't know. But that was the closest analogy I could give for you. Sorry, JB's a lot better at these than me. Patty R says sounds like the Bears. The point is, the person who's in charge, if they don't want you to move forward, you're not going to move forward.